My ex-wife claimed I was the father of her baby to get massive child support. I waited until court to reveal my vasectomy from 10 years ago. Not only did I win, I sued her for fees, and she's now bankrupt. All right, Reddit, buckle up because this one is a doozy. My ex-wife tried to pin a baby on me to collect massive child support, not knowing I had a vasectomy a decade ago. She found out the hard way in open court, and now she's financially ruined. Here's the whole story from start to finish. I, 34 male, grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. Blue-collar family, nothing fancy. My dad worked at a tool and dye shop for 30 years before his back gave out, and my mom did bookkeeping for local businesses from our kitchen table. They taught me the value of hard work, honesty, and keeping your word. Simple values that apparently aren't as common as they used to be. My parents were the kind of people who paid cash for everything, never carried a credit card balance, and believed that a man's handshake was as good as any contract. Dad would come home covered in metal shavings, hands calloused from decades of honest work, and he never once complained. That work ethic got drilled into me from an early age. You show up, you do your job right, and you don't take shortcuts. Period. Growing up in that house meant learning to fix things yourself. Dad had a workshop in the garage where he taught me basic mechanics, electrical work, plumbing. By the time I was 14, I could change a car's oil, replace a faucet, and wire a light switch. Those skills came in handy later when I bought my first house. But more importantly, they taught me that problems have solutions if you're willing to put in the work. After high school, I went to trade school for HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Not the most glamorous career path, but let me tell you something. When it's 98 degrees in July or 15 below in January, suddenly the HVAC guy becomes the most important person in your life. I worked my way up from apprentice to journeyman to master technician over the course of about 8 years. By the time I was 28, I had my own van, a solid client list, and was pulling in good money. The apprenticeship was brutal. 2 years of getting the worst jobs, crawling through attics in August when it felt like the surface of the sun, working in basements that hadn't seen a human in decades. My mentor was this old-timer named Gus, who'd been doing HVAC work since the Nixon administration. He was tough on me but fair, taught me that there's no shortcut to expertise, that every hour you put in makes you better at the job. By the time I got my journeyman certification, I could diagnose most problems by sound alone. The thing about HVAC work is that it's recession-proof. People always need heat and air conditioning. While my buddies who went into other fields were getting laid off during the economic downturn, I was working overtime, saved every penny I could, bought a modest house in a decent neighborhood, paid off my truck, and even started putting money into investments. Nothing crazy, just index funds and a Roth IRA. The house was a 3-bedroom ranch that needed some work when I bought it, which is exactly why I got it for such a good price. Previous owners had let things slide, but the bones were solid. Spent the first year fixing it up myself. New flooring, fresh paint, updated the kitchen with granite countertops I found on clearance, replaced the water heater, installed a new furnace at cost since I could get the equipment through work, even redid the landscaping in the front yard. By the time I was done, the place appraised for almost double what I paid. The garage became my sanctuary. Set it up with a proper workbench, tool organization system, even a small fridge for sodas when I was working on projects. Kevin would come over on weekends and we'd wrench on his truck, or just hang out, shooting the breeze while I organized my socket sets. That garage represented everything I'd built for myself, a tangible symbol of the life I'd created through hard work and smart decisions. Now here's the important part of this story, and I need you to pay attention because this is the foundation of everything that comes later. When I was 24 years old, I made a decision that would end up saving my entire future. I got a vasectomy. I know what you're thinking. 24? That's young. And you're right. It is. But here's the thing. I knew from the time I was about 16 that I didn't want kids. Never had that paternal instinct. Never got excited about the idea of fatherhood. Never looked at babies and felt anything other than mild discomfort. Some people are just wired differently, and I accepted that about myself early on. The decision wasn't impulsive either. I thought about it for years, did my research, talked to doctors. Most of them tried to talk me out of it, said I'd change my mind, said I'd meet the right woman, and suddenly want a family. One doctor actually refused to do the procedure, said he couldn't in good conscience sterilize someone so young. But I knew myself better than they did. Found a urologist named Dr. Hendricks who was willing to do the procedure after I signed about 15 different consent forms, acknowledging that it was permanent, and I understood the implications. He made me wait 30 days after the initial consultation to make sure I wasn't making a rash decision. I showed up on day 31 ready to go. Dr. Hendricks was an older guy, probably in his 60s, who'd been doing vasectomies for 3 decades. He didn't judge me or try to lecture me about my future. Just explained the procedure clearly, answered all my questions, and scheduled me for the following week. The procedure itself took maybe 20 minutes. Local anesthesia, couple of small incisions, and it was done. Recovery was easy. Couple days on the couch with frozen peas on my lap, back to work by Monday, got my follow-up test done, confirmed 0 sperm count, and that was that. Filed the paperwork away and moved on with my life. Even got a second confirmation test a year later just to be absolutely certain. Both results came back the same. Completely sterile. This is important because I kept all of those records. Every single piece of paper. The consultation notes, the consent forms, the surgical report, both lab results showing 0 sperm count. I'm not a paranoid person by nature, but something told me to hold on to that documentation. My dad always said to keep important papers, and I guess that advice stuck with me more than I realized at the time. Had a fireproof safe in my closet where I kept all the important stuff, birth certificate, social security card, house deed, and right there alongside them, my vasectomy records. Little did I know those medical documents would become the most valuable things I owned. Fast forward to 5 years ago. I'm 29, doing well for myself, and I meet Brittany at a friend's cookout. My buddy Craig was celebrating his promotion to shift supervisor at the manufacturing plant where he worked, and he'd invited half the neighborhood to his backyard for burgers and hot dogs. Craig had set up a volleyball net in the backyard, had a cooler full of sodas and bottled water, and was manning the grill like his life depended on it. His wife Jenny had made these amazing potato salad and baked beans from scratch. It was one of those perfect summer days where everything just feels right. Brittany was 26 at the time, worked as an administrative assistant at a real estate company, and had this smile that could light up a room. She came with her friend Nicole, who knew Craig's wife from some yoga class they both took. We hit it off immediately. She seemed impressed that I owned my own home and had a stable career. Said she was tired of dating guys who couldn't get their lives together. That first conversation lasted almost 2 hours. We stood by the cooler talking about everything from our families to our favorite movies to our worst dating experiences. She had this way of making me feel like I was the only person at the entire party. When she laughed at my jokes, even the dumb ones, I felt 10 feet tall. She asked about my job, and unlike most people who glazed over when I talked about HVAC work, she seemed genuinely interested. Asked how I got into it, what the hardest part was, whether I planned to start my own company someday. By the time Craig was announcing that the burgers were ready, I'd already decided I was going to ask for her number. The first year was great. We went on dates almost every weekend, long drives through the countryside, dinner at little hole-in-the-wall restaurants, lazy Sundays watching movies on my couch with takeout containers spread across the coffee table. She loved my house, said it felt like a real home compared to her cramped apartment, would spend hours in my garage asking me about my tools, what each one was for, seeming fascinated by my ability to fix things. We moved in together after about 8 months, got engaged at the 1-year mark. She knew about my vasectomy from early on. I told her on our 3rd date because I figured it was important information. If she wanted kids, we weren't compatible, and I didn't want to waste either of our time. I still remember that conversation. We were at this Italian place downtown, sharing a tiramisu, and I just came out with it. Told her I'd had a vasectomy at 24, that I'd never wanted kids and still didn't, that this was non-negotiable for me. Figured she'd probably thank me for my honesty, and that would be the last date. Her reaction surprised me. She said she wasn't sure if she wanted kids anyway, that she'd seen too many of her friends struggle as single mothers when relationships fell apart. Said she liked the idea of a life focused on us, on travel, on building something together without the stress of raising children. It felt like we were perfectly aligned. I remember thinking I'd hit the jackpot, a beautiful woman who shared my vision for the future, who appreciated my stability, who didn't see my choice about children as a deal breaker. When I told my buddy Kevin about her reaction to the vasectomy news, he said I'd found a unicorn. Looking back, I guess I should have been more suspicious of how perfectly she matched everything I was looking for. We got married in a small ceremony at the county courthouse. Neither of us wanted a big wedding. Spent the money on a honeymoon to the Caribbean instead. 2 weeks of beaches, good food, and what I thought was the beginning of our forever. Brittany kept saying how glad she was that we weren't blowing 30 grand on a single day like some of her friends had done. The first 2 years of marriage were solid. We fell into a comfortable routine. She'd leave for work around 8. I'd head out for my first service call around 7. We'd meet back home in the evenings, cook dinner together, or order takeout, watch whatever show we were binging at the time. Weekends were for errands, projects around the house, occasional dinners with friends. Nothing dramatic, just a good life with someone I thought I loved. The problem started about 2 years into the marriage. Brittany started making comments about her friends' kids, about how cute they were, about how maybe she was changing her mind about motherhood. Little things at first. She'd coo over baby pictures on Facebook, linger in front of the baby section at Target, mention how nice it must be to have someone carry on your legacy. I reminded her about my vasectomy, about the fact that we discussed this extensively before getting married. She said she knew, but couldn't a person's feelings change? I told her feelings could change, but biology couldn't, at least not reliably. Vasectomy reversals weren't guaranteed, and I wasn't interested in pursuing one anyway. This was who I was. This was what I'd been upfront about from day one, and I wasn't going to change. We had the same conversation probably a dozen times over the next year. Each time, I told her the same thing. Each time, she seemed to accept it, only to bring it up again a few weeks later. It was exhausting, like having the same argument on an endless loop. Around year 3, things got weird. Brittany started going out more often with her girlfriends, started taking more care with her appearance even for trips to the grocery store, would get defensive if I asked simple questions about her day. Classic signs that I was too blind or too trusting to see at the time. She'd come home from these girls' nights glowing in a way she never did when she was just with me. Started keeping her phone on silent, always face down on whatever surface was nearest. If I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd quickly put the phone away and make some excuse about just checking the weather or looking at work emails. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. Found her in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed tones. When she saw me, she hung up immediately and said it was Nicole having some crisis with her boyfriend. The next day, I mentioned to Craig's wife, Jenny, that I hoped Nicole was okay. And Jenny looked confused, said she'd been with Nicole all night at some book club meeting. Her best friend Nicole would come over constantly, and they'd whisper together, going quiet whenever I walked into the room. I figured it was wedding planning for Nicole's upcoming marriage, or some other girl stuff I didn't need to be involved in. Looking back, I was an idiot. They were probably planning their whole scheme right there in my living room, while I was in the kitchen, making them snacks. Nicole always gave me weird vibes, honestly. She'd look at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between pity and amusement. At the time, I thought she was just awkward. Now I know she was in on everything from the start. Then came the business trip. Brittany told me her company was sending her to a conference in Atlanta for a week. Real estate industry thing. Networking opportunities. The whole deal. She was excited about it. Said it could lead to a promotion. I helped her pack, drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye. Didn't think twice about it. Even sent her good luck text that first night, which she responded to with smiley faces and heart emojis. She called me every night that week, told me about the sessions she attended, the people she met, how exhausted she was from all the networking, sent me pictures of herself at what looked like a conference center, in hotel lobbies, at restaurants with coworkers. I had no reason to doubt any of it, except there was no conference. Found that out later when I ran into her boss at a hardware store and mentioned how glad I was that Brittany was back from Atlanta. The confusion on his face told me everything. He had no idea what I was talking about. Said the company hadn't sent anyone to any conferences recently due to budget cuts. Asked if maybe she meant a different kind of professional development event. Nope. The drive home from that hardware store was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every red light gave me more time to think, and every thought made things worse. She'd lied to my face for a full week, sent me photos that were supposedly from Atlanta but could have been taken anywhere, called me every night before bed while supposedly exhausted from networking events. The whole thing was fiction. I'd been played like a fool. I confronted Brittany that night. The argument that followed was explosive. She admitted she'd spent the week in Chicago with someone she'd met online. Said she felt trapped in our marriage, felt like I'd taken away her choice to have children, felt like she deserved more than what I could give her. The guy in Chicago apparently had 2 kids from a previous relationship and made her feel like the woman she wanted to be. The way she said it, like I was the villain for being exactly who I'd always said I was. Like having a vasectomy was some kind of betrayal even though she'd known about it before we ever got serious. She actually had the nerve to tell me this was partially my fault for not being willing to compromise on the kid thing. I didn't yell, didn't throw things, just stood there listening as she justified her betrayal with excuse after excuse. When she finally stopped talking, I asked one question. How long has this been going on? She couldn't meet my eyes. 6 months, she admitted. 6 months of lying, of sneaking around, of making me feel crazy for noticing something was wrong. 6 months of coming home from being with him and pretending everything was normal between us. I was done. Packed a bag that night and stayed at my buddy Kevin's place. Filed for divorce the next week. Kevin's been my best friend since middle school. Works as an electrician, divorced himself about 3 years prior, knows exactly what it's like to have your world flipped upside down. His spare bedroom became my home for the next couple months, while the divorce proceedings got underway. That first night at Kevin's, we sat on his back porch with sodas and just talked. He didn't offer advice or try to fix things, just listened. Told me about when he caught his ex-wife in a similar situation, how the betrayal felt like a physical wound that took years to heal. Having someone who understood made all the difference. Kevin's place wasn't fancy, just a 2-bedroom condo he'd bought after his divorce, but it felt more like home than my own house had in months. His dog Max would curl up at my feet while I sat on the couch staring at nothing, processing everything. Animals always know when you're hurting. The divorce itself was fairly straightforward. We didn't have kids, obviously. The house was in my name from before the marriage. She'd contributed nothing to the mortgage, nothing to the down payment. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, not community property, so the judge looked at what each person brought to the marriage and what they contributed during it. Brittany walked away with some furniture, her car, and a small settlement that honestly felt like too much given the circumstances, but I just wanted it over. My attorney at the time, a guy named Frank Patterson, who handled the divorce, told me I could fight for a more favorable outcome given the infidelity, but I didn't want to drag things out. The faster she was out of my life, the faster I could start moving forward. Signed the final papers, became officially single again, and started rebuilding my life. Threw myself into work, picked up extra clients, started hitting the gym more regularly. My buddy Kevin introduced me to his bowling league, and suddenly I had a social life again. Wednesday nights at the lanes, Saturday morning basketball at the rec center with the guys. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The bowling league was exactly what I needed. A bunch of regular guys who just wanted to throw some balls, drink some sodas, and bust each other's chops. Nobody asked about my ex. Nobody treated me like a charity case. Just friendly competition and genuine friendship. Our team, the Pin Destroyers, wasn't great at first, but we got better every week. Started doing some improvements on the house too. Figured if I was going to be living there alone, I might as well make it exactly how I wanted. Built a deck in the backyard, installed a new bathroom vanity, finally got around to finishing the basement. Turned the finished basement into a proper entertainment area with a big screen TV, comfortable couch, and enough room for the guys to come over and watch games. Then, exactly 14 months after our divorce was finalized, I got the letter that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning. Nothing special about it. Grabbed my mail on the way in from work like I always did, flipping through the usual junk mail and bills. Then I saw the return address. Ashworth and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Didn't recognize the name, but the official-looking envelope made my stomach drop. It was from Brittany's attorney, a guy named Richard Ashworth from some firm downtown I'd never heard of. The letter stated that Brittany had given birth to a baby boy 3 months prior and was seeking child support payments from me as the biological father. She was requesting $2,400 per month based on my income, plus retroactive support from the date of birth, plus coverage for medical expenses related to the pregnancy and delivery. The total she was claiming I owed, including back support and medical bills, was over $35,000 right out of the gate. I read that letter 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something. Then I started laughing. Actually laughing out loud in my kitchen at 7 in the morning. So hard I had to sit down. She was claiming I was the father. Me. The guy with the vasectomy. The guy who'd been confirmed sterile twice over the past decade. The guy who had medical documentation, proving he couldn't father a child if his life depended on it. The audacity was almost impressive. My first instinct was to call her directly, ask if this was some kind of joke. But something stopped me. That same intuition that made me keep all those medical records. Instead, I called Kevin. Kevin listened to the whole thing, then said one sentence that set the tone for everything that followed. Don't say a word to her. Get a lawyer. He reminded me how his buddy had tried to handle something similar on his own and ended up making things worse by saying things that got twisted around in court. Spent the rest of that morning researching attorneys. Called in sick to work, something I never do, but this felt more important than any furnace repair. Needed someone who specialized in family law, someone with experience handling paternity disputes, someone who'd believe me when I said there was literally no way this kid was mine. Found an attorney named Patricia Holloway through a recommendation from Kevin's divorce lawyer. She specialized in family law and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when the facts were on her side. Her reviews online were full of grateful clients talking about how she'd saved them from unfair situations. Exactly what I needed. Walked into her office with the letter from Brittany's attorney in one hand and my vasectomy records in the other. Her office was in a nice building downtown. Not flashy, but professional. The kind of place that said she was successful enough to afford good real estate, but practical enough not to waste money on unnecessary luxury. The look on her face when she reviewed everything was priceless. She actually set down her pen, leaned back in her chair, and said, "Mr. Richardson, I think we're going to have some fun with this one." Then she smiled, and I knew I'd found the right attorney. Patricia's strategy was simple but effective. We wouldn't tip our hand. We'd respond to the paternity claim through proper legal channels, request the standard DNA test that would prove I wasn't the father, and let Brittany dig her own grave. Every lie she told, every document she signed, every statement she made under oath claiming I was the father would be another nail in her coffin. She explained that rushing to reveal the vasectomy would be satisfying but strategically stupid. By letting Brittany commit fully to her false claim, we'd build a much stronger case for fraud and sanction. Over the next few weeks, we learned more about the situation through the legal discovery process. Brittany had apparently been in a relationship with someone named Dylan Whitmore since before our divorce was even finalized. Guy worked as a server at some trendy restaurant downtown, no real assets to speak of, had a history of bouncing from job to job. He drove a beat-up Honda and rented a studio apartment that was barely larger than my garage. When she got pregnant, she saw an opportunity. I had a good income, a house, savings, investments. Dylan had a studio apartment and a car payment he was behind on. The math was simple for her. Pin the baby on the ex-husband with the steady job and collect support for the next 18 years. The problem with that math was that she forgot one crucial variable, the vasectomy. Patricia was methodical in building our case. She started by requesting all communication records between Brittany and Dylan, any evidence of their relationship timeline, and financial records showing any transfers between them. She also requested Brittany's social media data, which turned out to be a goldmine of evidence. The discovery process took about 3 weeks. During that time, Patricia kept me informed about what she was finding, and each update made the case against Brittany stronger. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while, probably from the moment she found out she was pregnant. Patricia subpoenaed phone records, bank statements, social media data. Everything Brittany had tried to keep hidden came spilling out. Text messages between her and Dylan going back almost 2 years, well into our marriage. Photos of them together at his apartment during times she'd told me she was at work. Financial records showing she'd been secretly supporting him with money she'd skimmed from our household budget. The preliminary hearings were interesting. Brittany's attorney was pushing hard for temporary support while paternity was being established, claiming that the child needed immediate financial assistance and that delaying support would cause irreparable harm. He painted a picture of a struggling single mother barely able to afford diapers, while her deadbeat ex refused to step up. Patricia countered by requesting an expedited DNA test, pointing out that temporary support shouldn't be ordered until paternity was actually confirmed. She noted that the timeline didn't add up, that conception would have occurred after our separation, that there was no reason to believe my client was the father other than Ms. Richardson's say-so. The judge agreed with us, ordered the DNA test, scheduled the results hearing for 6 weeks out, and denied temporary support pending confirmation of paternity. Brittany looked furious as she left the courtroom. Her attorney tried to console her, but she brushed him off and stormed out ahead of everyone. I just smiled and kept my mouth shut. Outside the courthouse, Kevin was waiting for me. He'd taken the day off to be there for moral support. We grabbed lunch at a diner down the street, and I told him everything that had happened inside. He couldn't believe Brittany's attorney had tried to get temporary support without even confirming paternity first. Said it was a clear sign they knew the DNA test wouldn't go their way, and were trying to establish a payment pattern before the truth came out. Those 6 weeks were interesting. Brittany tried reaching out multiple times through various channels. Texts that I screenshotted and forwarded to Patricia without responding. Voicemails that were emotional, manipulative, sometimes angry. She alternated between threatening me and begging me to just work this out without lawyers involved. She showed up at my house once, but I didn't answer the door. Just watched through the peephole as she pounded on it for 10 minutes before finally leaving. She was crying, probably hoping I'd take pity on her. But I remembered every lie, every betrayal, every time she'd made me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong. The DNA results came back exactly as expected, 0% probability of paternity. The lab report was definitive. There was no genetic relationship between me and the child whatsoever. The science was absolute, irrefutable, exactly what I'd known from the moment I read that first letter. Patricia called me with the results, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "We've got her," she said. "Now the real fun begins." Now, a normal person might have dropped the case at this point, apologized for the misunderstanding, maybe claimed she genuinely believed I was the father, walked away embarrassed but relatively unscathed. Brittany was not a normal person. Her attorney filed a motion challenging the DNA results, claiming the test must have been contaminated or improperly administered. Requested a second test from a different lab. The audacity was stunning. Even faced with scientific proof, she was doubling down on the lie. The judge granted the request but warned that frivolous challenges would not be tolerated. Gave Brittany a stern look that suggested she was running out of rope. Second test, same results. 0% probability, 2 different labs, 2 different tests, identical conclusion. That's when things got really interesting. Patricia filed a motion for sanctions against Brittany for filing a fraudulent paternity claim. We attached my vasectomy records, including the surgical report, and both sterility confirmation tests. We documented the timeline, showing the vasectomy was performed 5 years before I even met Brittany. We included evidence that Brittany had been in a relationship with Dylan Whitmore during the likely conception window. The hearing for sanctions was something I'll never forget. The courtroom was cold, those old municipal buildings with the high ceilings that never quite warm up, but I was sweating anyway. Brittany's attorney tried to argue that my vasectomy records were irrelevant, that vasectomies could naturally reverse themselves, that there was still a theoretical possibility I could have fathered the child. Patricia dismantled every argument methodically. She brought in my urologist, Dr. Hendricks, as a witness, who testified that spontaneous reversal of a vasectomy is extremely rare, typically only occurs in the first few months after the procedure, and would show up on the confirmation tests I had done. Both of my tests showed complete sterility. The probability of natural reversal after 10 years was essentially 0. Then Patricia dropped the hammer. She introduced evidence that Brittany had told multiple people, including her own mother, that Dylan was the baby's father. Text messages recovered through legal discovery showed Brittany and Nicole discussing how to make the paternity claim against me seem believable. There were conversations about timing, about what to say, about how to explain away inconsistencies. One text exchange was particularly damning. Brittany had asked Nicole if she thought I'd believe the baby was mine, and Nicole had responded with something like, "Just cry a lot and act desperate. Men are suckers for that stuff." The judge's expression when that was read into the record was something I'll never forget. It was fraud, deliberate, calculated, documented fraud. The judge found that Brittany had knowingly and intentionally filed a false paternity claim for the purpose of obtaining financial support to which she was not entitled. The sanctions were substantial. Brittany was ordered to pay all of my legal fees, which had accumulated to just over $18,000 by that point. She was also ordered to pay a fine to the court for abuse of the legal process. Brittany was crying by the end. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. Her attorney looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but we weren't done. Patricia and I discussed our options after the sanctions hearing. She explained that while the sanctions covered my legal fees, they didn't compensate me for the damage Brittany had done to my reputation and business. That would require a separate civil action. I told her to go ahead. If Brittany wanted to play games, we'd play to win. Patricia filed a civil lawsuit against Brittany for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. The defamation claim was based on statements Brittany had made to mutual acquaintances claiming I had abandoned my child and was a deadbeat father. These statements had damaged my reputation and had even affected my business. I'd lost 2 clients who'd heard the rumors and didn't want to work with someone they thought was dodging his parental responsibilities. One of them, a property management company I'd serviced for 3 years, had specifically cited the stories about me as their reason for switching to a competitor. The property manager, a guy named Howard who I'd always gotten along with, called me to explain. Said he personally didn't believe the rumors, but his corporate office had a policy about associating with anyone facing child support disputes. It wasn't personal, just business. But it felt pretty personal when I lost that monthly contract. The other client was an apartment complex I'd been servicing for about 18 months. The building manager had heard about the situation from someone who knew Nicole and had decided to preemptively end our business relationship. Didn't even give me a chance to explain. Just sent an email saying they'd be going with a different HVAC company going forward. Patricia documented all of this for the civil case. Every lost contract, every rumor that could be traced back to Brittany, every statement she'd made to people we knew. The evidence file grew thicker every week. The civil case took another 8 months to work through the system, but the outcome was never really in doubt. With the court's prior findings of fraud already on record, Brittany's defense was essentially non-existent. The jury awarded me $45,000 in damages, $30,000 in compensatory damages for the harm to my reputation and emotional distress, and $15,000 in punitive damages to punish Brittany for her conduct. The foreperson read the verdict, and I saw Brittany's face go pale. Combined with the sanctions from the family court case, Brittany now owed me over $63,000. She didn't have it, not even close. Dylan had bailed on her shortly after the DNA results came back. Her parents had cut her off after learning about the fraud. Brittany had lost her job when the court proceedings became public knowledge. The real estate company didn't want an employee with a documented history of fraud representing them to clients. She tried to negotiate. Offered to pay $200 a month until the debt was satisfied. Patricia countered with a lien on any future assets, garnishment of any future wages, and a structured payment plan with interest. Brittany couldn't agree to those terms because she had no wages to garnish and no assets to lien. So she filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 7. Complete liquidation. Everything she had went to pay creditors, and I was at the front of the line with a court judgment. She got to keep her car because it was worth less than the exemption limit and some personal items. Everything else was gone. The furniture she'd taken in the divorce, the jewelry she'd accumulated, even some electronics she'd bought with the money she'd skimmed from our accounts during the marriage. All of it liquidated and distributed to creditors. The bankruptcy trustee contacted me during the process to verify the debt. I provided all the documentation, the court judgments, the sanctions order, everything. The trustee confirmed that because the debt arose from fraud, it was non-dischargeable under bankruptcy law. Brittany could wipe out her credit card debt, her medical bills, even the money she owed her landlord for breaking her lease. But my judgment would survive. And here's the kicker. Because fraud judgments are generally non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, she still owed me the balance even after the bankruptcy was complete. That judgment will be hanging over her head for years. Interest continues to accrue. If she ever gets a decent job, I can garnish her wages. If she ever buys property, I can put a lien on it. That debt follows her everywhere. Last I heard, she was living with a cousin in some small town in Indiana, working part-time at a gas station, and still technically owing me about $40,000. The bankruptcy destroyed her credit. She can't get an apartment, can't get a car loan, can't get a credit card. She's essentially starting over from nothing at 32 years old. The credit score that she'd built up over years of responsible spending and timely payments, gone. It'll take her 7 to 10 years just to get back to a point where she could qualify for a basic credit card. And Dylan, the actual father, he's apparently paying actual child support now, about $180 a month based on his server income. Brittany's raising the kid mostly on her own, which is ironic considering she tried to avoid exactly that situation by pinning the baby on me. After the civil judgment was entered, Nicole reached out to me through social media, sent this long message apologizing for her role in everything, said she felt terrible about helping cover up the relationship with Dylan. I didn't respond, blocked her, and moved on. As for me, life's pretty good these days. Business is thriving. Got those 2 clients back after the court findings became public, and they realized the rumors were lies. Actually picked up 3 more clients who heard about the case and respected how I handled it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.